Throughout the animal kingdom, many unfair myths have been perpetuated through popular culture. Pigs are, contrary to belief, very clean animals. Touching a toad won't give you warts. Goldfish have memories that can span beyond just a few seconds. And showing a bull the colour red won't cause it to jump into a blind rage. These untruths have been spread far and wide throughout the years. But one of the broadest and most unsubstantiated animal misconceptions revolves around vultures, one of the most unique groups of birds of prey in the world. Books, cartoons, and popular culture in general have fed us the idea for decades that these huge aerial scavengers are unclean, or even evil. They have been portrayed as dark, villainous animals on many occasions. But how much of this is within reason? You might be surprised to learn very little of it. There are currently 16 recognized species of Old World vultures inhabiting the continents of Europe, Africa, and Asia, and 7 species of New World vulture living throughout North and South America. These are intelligent, complex, and important birds that provide vital services to the natural world in preventing the spread of disease, not causing it. But how and why are vultures so important to the animal kingdom, and how do they live? What kinds of environments do these magnificent soaring birds live across? And what do we know about them? In this video, we aim to answer all of these questions and more. Join us on a journey that will span most of the world to meet the various species of vulture that roam our skies. Unlike most birds whose species are often confined to a single family, the 23 species of vulture across the world span 2. While all vultures belong to the order Accipitriformes, the Old World vultures sit within the family Accipitridae, along with the hawks, eagles, kites, and harriers. These vultures are found across much of Eurasia, with even wider ranges across almost all of Africa. New World vultures are found continuously from southern Canada in the north to the southernmost tip of Chile in the south. These vultures sit within the family Cathartidae and contain some of the most awe-inspiring flying animals that have ever lived. Despite the fact that Old and New World vultures share many characteristics and behavioural traits with one another, they are not extremely closely related by taxonomic standards and are thought to have evolved their scavenging traits separately, in an instance of convergent evolution. For a while, New and Old World vultures were actually split into 2 separate orders of birds, although they are now united under Accipitriformes, which houses many birds of prey. So, how do you tell the 2 families apart? While much of it comes down to range, there are additional differences. Old World vultures seek out carcasses to scavenge from using sight, and sight alone, while New World vultures have exceptional senses of smell, using highly developed olfactory systems to home in on a meal from afar. Old World vultures are also much more vocal than New World vultures, the former making a variety of screeches, grunts, and croaks depending on the species, while the latter communicate primarily using guttural, snake-like hissing sounds. Moreover, many species of New World vulture will lay their eggs on bare surfaces, such as rock faces or on mounds of dirt, while Old World vultures will build nests in notches within cliffs or in the branches of trees. The differences are much more pronounced on a species-to-species level, and many vultures within the same families look vastly different to one another. Due to the sheer variety and diversity of vulture species throughout the world, it would be very difficult to give each one the attention it's due in this one video. Therefore, let's give a brief rundown of the 23 different vultures found worldwide, so you have an idea of who's who throughout the rest of the documentary. Old World vultures include the following species: the bearded vulture, or Lammergeier, a large and powerful species that lives across mountains in southern Eurasia. The palm nut vulture, a striking black and white species that lives in forests throughout southern Africa. The Egyptian vulture, an all-white species with a bright yellow face that lives primarily in North Africa. The Cinereus, or Eurasian black vulture, a huge species that can be found from Central Europe to Western Asia. The Eurasian griffon vulture, a very large species known from mountain ranges across southern Eurasia and North Africa. The white-rumped vulture, a dark-coloured species that lives throughout the Himalayas and Southeast Asia. The Revolves vulture, a large brown and white species that lives in Central Africa's Sahel region. The Indian vulture, a medium-sized species known from across the Indian subcontinent. The slender-billed vulture, a critically endangered species found only in the foothills of the southern Himalayas. The Himalayan vulture, a large, densely feathered species adapted to life on the Tibetan Plateau and cold peaks of the Himalayas. The white-backed vulture, a large, pale species found soaring above the Central African savannas. The Cape vulture, a large cliff-dwelling species that lives throughout southern Africa. The hooded vulture, a striking brown and pink species known from across sub-Saharan Africa. The red-headed vulture, a vibrant red and black species known from across the Indian subcontinent. The lappet-faced vulture, a species known from across sub-Saharan Africa with a peculiar blue and red colouring across its head. The white-headed vulture, a large sub-Saharan African species that used to range as far as Indonesia. New World vultures include the following species: the black vulture, a dark, medium-sized species and a common sight across the forests and grasslands of the Americas. The turkey vulture, a common species with a striking pink head found across the Americas. The lesser yellow-headed vulture and greater yellow-headed vultures, both of which primarily inhabit the forests of South America. The California condor, a gigantic, critically endangered species now found only in isolated spots across California and Arizona. The Andean condor, a gigantic species equipped for the cold air of the Andes Mountains in South America. The king vulture, found from southern Mexico to northern Argentina, and possibly the most vibrantly coloured of all vulture species. While vultures are generally very large birds, they differ vastly in size. The world's smallest species is the palm nut vulture, which measures around 60 centimeters or 2 feet, from beak to tail. Despite being the smallest of its kind, it still boasts a wingspan of 1.5 meters, or just under 5 feet, across. This contrasts greatly with the world's largest species, the Andean condor, whose wingspan can reach up to 3 meters, or just under 10 feet, across. It also boasts a body length of over 1 meter, or almost 4 feet, and can weigh up to 14 kilograms, or 31 pounds. Vultures are primarily known for one thing: scavenging, and with good reason. As far as we know, vultures are the only terrestrial animals that feed almost exclusively as scavengers. Other carnivores such as hyenas will supplement their diet with a hunt, but vultures are very unlikely to attack a live animal. If they do hunt, it will be to finish off an animal that is nearing the end of its life due to sickness or a wound. Living lives as scavengers means that vultures will typically eat large amounts of putrid meat that would be unsuitable for most carnivores to stomach. To combat this, they are equipped with extremely corrosive stomach acid, with a pH level of 1.0, which lets the birds safely stomach all manner of diseases. Botulism, cholera, and anthrax levels in a carcass are of no concern to these hardy scavengers, and they won't become sick from consuming high levels of rotting meat. One of the most visible features of most vultures is their bald heads. Unlike other birds of prey, some species of vulture lack head feathers so they can reach deep into a carcass to search for the best meat. While blood would remain stuck to feathers, possibly staining them, a vulture can simply wash this off with ease in the nearest watering hole when they're done feeding. Old world vultures are capable of spotting prey animals from great distances, using their exceptional eyesight and the advantage of being able to fly to seek out a meal. Attracted by the sight of a carcass from above, they'll swoop down from the air and settle by it, ready to tuck in if larger scavengers or predators are nowhere to be seen. In some instances, if a carcass has a tougher hide than a vulture is capable of breaking with its beak, the birds will wait for larger scavengers such as lions and hyenas to have their share first, before picking at the scraps they leave in their wake. Some individuals are far more bold, however, and may attempt to snatch some food while a larger carnivore is still gorging itself. If this happens, the bird must be quick to react, as many have died at the claws of a hungry lion while literally biting off more than they can chew. When a vulture feeds, it will keep doing so until it cannot fit any more meat within its crop, a special storage chamber found in a bird's digestive system at the base of the neck. While most birds of prey will carry food in their claws back to the nest to feed their young, a vulture will simply release meat from its crop when providing for its chicks, while digesting a portion for itself. Not all vultures are strict flesh eaters, however, and some species have more varied diets. The palm nut vulture is the least carnivorous of known vulture species and will venture into feeding on wild dates and, as their name suggests, palm nuts. In fact, flesh makes up only a small part of their diet. Many species, the palm nut vulture included, will also readily pick at insects and aquatic invertebrates where they can. Various species of New World vulture, such as the black and turkey varieties, will frequently take maggots and won't shy away from eating from bins and landfills. The bearded vulture, an intimidating and striking Eurasian species, has a diet composed almost entirely of bones rather than meat itself. While these unique birds can swallow bones whole up to a certain size, larger bones require a special feeding method. In their mountainous homes, this isn't a problem. The vulture can simply carry the bones into the high alpine air before dropping them onto the boulders below, shattering them into easier to consume pieces. Vultures play an extremely important part in tidying up ecosystems, ridding them of harmful bacteria, and preventing the spread of disease. By feeding on carcasses that are rotting or infected with pathogens, they act as nature's aerial cleanup crew, allowing larger scavengers such as hyenas and lions to scavenge without the risk of falling ill. This is equally important in urban or rural settlements where people may come into contact with the corpses of animals. They are quite literally lifesavers. New World vultures are known for two unique and rather unsightly traits that are seen in few other birds. The first is that these birds are known to release urine straight down their legs, intentionally. The urine contains high levels of uric acid, which, after a long day of stomping through rotting meat and entrails, helps to kill any bacteria that may still be attached to their legs. In hotter regions, such as South and Central America, this can help to cool the birds down as the urine evaporates. Additionally, New World vultures have developed a peculiar defense mechanism when faced with attack from a predator. They can vomit up a food stored in their crop prematurely. While this was once thought to be a means of showering the assailant in rancid material to harm them, it may instead be a way to lighten their load as they make a quick escape. Rather a hungry, alive vulture than a full dead one. As the vulture vomits up its food, the vile mixture left behind may also distract the predator, giving the bird that extra few seconds to escape. If you're watching a flying vulture, the chances are that it will be soaring. Soaring is a flight technique practiced by numerous large bird species, but vultures are masters of the art. In order to soar, a vulture will locate an uplifting thermal of rising hot air in the sky, which will enable it to effectively float without having to expend much energy in flapping their wings to stay aloft. While soaring, a vulture will be able to scan the environment for any possible signs of carrion, gaining a massive height advantage and not tiring themselves out in the process. Vultures typically have broad, splayed wings with long primary flight feathers that catch the thermals as they travel upwards, which allows them to stay aloft for even longer periods of time. While on the wing, an old world vulture will use its superior eyesight, 8 times better than that of our own, to spot a carcass to eat, while a New World vulture will utilize its excellent sense of smell, a trait unusual for birds. Some species can detect the scent of a dead animal from up to a mile away. On average, vulture species tend to be rather long-lived birds. In the wild, they can live for anywhere between 20 to 25 years if food supplies are consistent, and this can be extended by around 5 years for birds in suitable human care. Some species, such as the bone-crunching bearded vulture, have been known to live anywhere up to the ripe age of 40. America's black vulture is thought to be the shortest lived of all, but can still reach the age of 10 in the wild. That's considerably long-lived for a bird. Most vultures lay between 1 to 3 eggs, although 2 is most common. With New World vultures, very little effort, if any, is expended in building a nest. The bird will simply lay its eggs on a rocky surface, and the female will ensure it receives the heat it needs to develop. Old World vultures tend to take more time in establishing a structurally sound bundle of sticks on a rock face or in a tree. On average, vulture chicks take around 40 days to hatch from their eggs if incubated well, and emerge into the world looking very little like their parents. Covered in a light, fluffy down of feathers, the young will be fed by their parents for several weeks until they are ready to fly and scavenge for themselves. Vultures will reach maturity around the age of 5, at which point they are ready to mate. While many bird species will take multiple partners throughout their lives, vultures are thought to stay with the same partner for the rest of their days. They form extremely strong bonds, and both birds take great care in ensuring the survival of their chicks year on year. The breeding season lasts from October to April, and successful couples may rear many chicks throughout their long lives. When getting ready to mate, vultures will undertake a variety of different courtship rituals depending on the species. Some, such as the turkey vulture, will begin their courtship on the ground, hopping in circles and spreading their wings. They will then take to the sky, chasing one another in an erratic pattern of rising and diving. Others, such as the vibrant South American king vulture, will produce a loud array of croaking and wheezing sounds while bowing their heads ahead of mating. Vultures have been living alongside people since the dawn of our evolutionary ancestors. True vultures evolved in the Miocene epoch, between 23 and 5 million years ago. The ancestors of humans, the Australopithecines, didn't appear until the Pliocene, over 4 million years ago, and we occupied the exact same regions as these aerial scavengers in the African grasslands throughout prehistory. In fact, some of the kills made by our early ancestors were almost certainly scavenged by vultures once we'd had our fill. For the most part, wherever our ancestors traveled outside of Africa in the early years of human expansion, vultures were there to clean up the hills and plains, and later went on to inspire human creativity and religion. Vultures appear to have held significance in the pantheon of the ancient Egyptians and have been important to humanity since the dawn of civilization. Vultures seem to have had a link to women in ancient Egypt, and people here believed that all vultures were female, born from eggs without fertilization, and were in turn connected to the process of motherhood. Nekhbet, a local goddess from the ancient Egyptian city of Nekheb, was depicted as a vulture, specifically an Eurasian griffon vulture. Nekhbet has been depicted across sites pertaining to ancient Nekheb and was usually depicted with her wings spread above the royal image, clutching a shen ring in her talons, a symbol of protection. The great royal wives of ancient Egyptian pharaohs typically wore vulture crowns with spread wings hanging down over the sides of their heads. Vulture reverence seems to have spread to Egypt's New Kingdom too, where numerous art pieces seem to depict the distinctive blue-tipped beaks of the lappet-faced vulture. In some regions, vultures were seen as representatives of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth, as a result of their tendencies to transform long-dead animals into new life via consumption. New World vultures have also been depicted across art, specifically from the Central American civilizations of the Maya and the Aztecs. Some native cultures here depicted the birds negatively, as flesh-eating scourges, while others understood them as a positive influence on their environments. Pottery was intricately crafted with the head, wings, and talons of vultures in Aztec society, while others were worked into stone art pieces and sculptures. Regardless of how they were depicted, Mesoamerican cultures seem to have appreciated vultures as otherworldly beings. It's not just the corpses of wild animals that vultures have fed upon throughout human history, however. These birds aren't fussy, and will take human meat as readily as any other kind. Humanity's hunger for war and conflict has provided vultures across the world with a steady supply of meat as they descend into the wake of the fire and smoke to pick off the corpses left behind. The ancient Greeks noted this, associating the birds with Ares, the god of war, due to their tendency to circle above battlefields after the fighting came to a close. More modern accounts tell of the black vultures that gathered throughout major battles in the American Civil War, picking off their share of horse and human meat from Gettysburg, for example. Some religions have even been known to incorporate vultures into their burial practices. Buddhists in Tibet and Zoroastrianists in Iran historically practice sky burial, where a corpse is placed on a mountaintop to either decompose from exposure or to be taken by scavenging animals. As well as mammalian carnivores such as bears and jackals, vultures typically play a large part in sky burials and are often first to the scene, given their close proximity to mountains and their keen eyesight. In modern times, many species of vulture need our help. Generally, since the 1990s, populations of these majestic scavengers have seen a downwards trend, specifically in sites across Africa and South Asia. A major problem for vultures in India and Nepal is the presence of diclofenac, an anti-inflammatory drug used to treat the livestock that vultures feed upon. Despite their extreme digestive systems, vultures cannot defend against this drug, and often die when eating meat that has been exposed to it. While the Indian government has since taken action to ban use of the drug on animals, it may be a case of too little too late. Vulture populations in India are far from their natural population numbers, and it will be hard for them to return to them. In lieu of vultures in India, rabid dogs are beginning to run rampant, which can pose threats to human populations. In Tibet and the Middle East, sky burials are becoming rarer practices, which once provided a steady supply of meat for vultures in the Asian mountains. In Africa, vultures face significant issues with the bushmeat trade. Vulture meat has become a niche preference for some groups of people, and there is a high demand for it despite the decline. More and more wild vultures are killed for this reason, and some species, such as the Ruppel's griffon vulture, are on the brink of extinction as a result. It's not just the bushmeat trade that jeopardizes these species, however, and vultures face significant threats from poisoning, both intentional and unintentional. Intentional poisoning is a tactic used by poachers in Africa who may want to eliminate evidence of their activities. A rhinoceros or elephant corpse, for example, will draw in a large number of vultures whose overhead circling could attract unwanted attention, leading to the exposure of their crimes. To poison the corpses of their needless victims with pesticide, they reduce the chance that they will be arrested, which in turn leads to additional deaths of both vultures and large mammals. For reference on just how bad of a problem this can be, in 2019, 537 individual vultures in Botswana, including white-backed, white-headed, cape, lapped-faced, and hooded vultures, were killed after eating meat from the poisoned corpses of just 3 African elephants. Sadly, one of the vulture's largest and arguably most awe-inspiring members, the California condor, is amongst the most endangered animals on the planet. One of the major factors contributing to this is habitat loss, which has worsened as humans encroach upon the ancestral homelands of these mighty birds. So large are these aerial titans that they are believed to have been adapted to feeding on the corpses of America's long-extinct megafauna. That's the mammoths, mastodons, and ground sloths of the Pleistocene epoch. Food and habitat range is becoming more and more scarce for the condors, and they are now listed as critically endangered. Lead poisoning from traces within the remains of animals due to human activity can also be a major threat to both the California condor and its even larger Andean cousin. Moreover, in urban areas, power lines, buildings, and wind turbines can cause great issues as their massive wings collide with these structures. If that wasn't enough, condors have very slow breeding rates compared to other vultures, which can make it very difficult for populations to recover from such a drastic decline as this. At the time of scripting this video, There are thought to be as few as 561 California condors left in the world. With luck, this will hopefully improve with conservation efforts. Throughout the world, however, efforts are ongoing to tackle the destruction caused to vulture populations by tackling the issues head-on. Vulture safe zones have been set up in areas where the birds are targeted, where populations can be monitored and maintained without the risk of poachers and harmful substances making their way in. Governments are starting to ban the use of some materials, and conservationists are recommending alternative ways of medicating animals that will be less harmful to scavengers when livestock passes on. There are also plenty of charitable organizations helping to look after captive breeding vultures, encouraging them to reproduce so populations can eventually be reintroduced to the wild. In some regions, vultures without a mate are translocated to different populations in the hopes that they will be able to pair up and start producing chicks. Despite vultures being much more diverse in the Old World than the New, these birds actually evolved in the Americas first, with Old World vultures convergently evolving similar traits independently. In their respective regions, Old and New World vultures evolved in response to the abundance of corpses of large animals across the grasslands and hills of the ancient world. Several prehistoric vulture species are known from the Pleistocene epoch in great detail, including Cryptogyps, a relatively small species that shows that vultures were once present in Australia. With the discovery of cryptogams, it is now known that vultures have inhabited every continent across the world throughout their natural history, with the exception of Antarctica. Strangely, two vulture genera known from the Pleistocene of North America, Neophrontops and Neogyps, bear more resemblance to the Old World vultures than the New. They are taxonomically placed within the Old World vulture family, despite their discovery in the United States. For a long while, New and Old World vultures were not the only large scavenging birds of prey present in Earth's skies. From the late Oligocene epoch, around 25 million years ago, to as recently as 10,000 years ago in the late Pleistocene, the teratons scoured the land for carrion. The teratons are closely related to the New World vultures, but many genera and species within the family Teratornithidae were much larger than any known vultures, even the condors. These birds evolved in South America and slowly spread out into the north throughout the course of the Cenozoic era. By far the best known species is Teratornis merriami. Over 100 individuals have been recovered from the La Brea tar pits in California. Its almost 4-meter wingspan would have been a dramatic sight as it settled on the drowned corpses of mammoths and mastodons in the bubbling tar of ancient America. The most incredible teratorn, however, was Argentavis magnificens, a truly enormous bird that lived across the plains and hills of Argentina just under 7 million years ago. This giant of the skies boasted a wingspan between 6 and 8 meters across, making it one of the largest flying birds of all time. When standing, Argentavis would have been tall enough to look a fully grown man directly in the eye. Vultures are extremely adaptable animals and can benefit well at times when other animals do not. Their preference for carrion and abilities to consume rotting meat could very well see them through mass extinctions if the circumstance arose again. As adaptable as these birds are, however, they need our help now more than ever. Unnatural human drugs and pollutants are rendering vultures critically endangered across the world, and there is much to be done if wild vulture populations are to return to the levels once seen before human advancement. Leading the charge against the plight of these amazing birds is the Vulture Conservation Foundation, a charity targeting Eurasian species such as the bearded, griffin, cinereus, and Egyptian vultures. They promote captive breeding programs that put the vultures first, reintroduce the birds into areas in which they once lived wild, and monitor existing populations to put measures in place if they start to fall. Most recently, they have been working to reintroduce breeding bearded vultures into the mountains of France, Bulgaria, and Germany, and with their help, these birds may have a chance yet. Find out more and donate at 4vultures.org.